Welcome to another episode of the Fisherman's Favorite Podcast. We got Bro back in the studio today, and we're approaching fishing opener here in Minnesota, so we got an exciting topic to talk about today.
And I think we're going to hound Bro on some of his panfish tactics as well, so that early season panfish stuff too. So,
wow.
Should be a really good show. We're excited.
There's deer in the meadow, frogs in the pond, a place up the river where the fish are getting long. Bass in the lilies, crappie in the reeds, walleye on the rocks and pike in the weeds. There's a fella down the road who's a real fishing man, give you a stringer for the frying pan. Northland, fish and tackle, fisherman's favorite. It's a fisherman's favorite.
Welcome, Bro. What's new? What have you been fishing for? What are you getting ready for?
Well, thanks for having me in the studio, guys. This is really going to be fun. And opener is truly a holiday in Minnesota, and Wisconsin has their opener 1 week before us. And but I like where our opener's at. It typically gives the fish time to recuperate, so it's not just catching all little males. You could actually catch some real fish, and kind of in that time period could be fantastic panfish. So we can hurry up on the walleyes and then go fish for other stuff.
Yeah.
And so I love it. And is there anything or any way better to fish than a jig and a minnow?
That's right.
You feel the bite, you set the hook. It gives you something to do instead of trolling or dragging. We can drag a jig too, but that's what I'm excited about. I love jigging, and Northland is the jig king. It is the spot to get jigs in Northland fishing tackle. So I love using this stuff, and it's just which color are we gonna use? That's the big debate. And when I get to the end of the driveway, am I gonna take a right or a left? Those are two very difficult things.
Yeah. Life's good when those are the tough decisions, though. So what are you going to have tied up on your rod?
I'm going to have a tungsten jig for sure. And I'm thinking the way things are laying out, because I've seen water temperatures from 48 to 51. So I'm thinking, we got some 60s coming. I'm probably going to go with an 1/8 ounce. And I've noticed, because we didn't have a lot of, and there's a little clue for everybody, we didn't have a lot of snow this year. There's algae, and it's kind of laying on the bottom. You'll see a little puffy green stuff all over the place. And so I might even put on something lighter, but 1/8 ounce to start. And if I'm getting algae, then I might go to a 16th. And I haven't decided if I'm going to go long shank or short shank. I like double hooking shiners. Mm-hmm. Shiners are a cool bait, and I don't want to lose them. So I like to double hook them, and you don't have to. Sometimes a short shank through the nose, through the bone of the nose, not out a nostril or anything, probably is what I'm going to do. And it's really tough. And Tom Wynn, close your ears to this. I'm not going to put black on. I'm probably going to put parrot or moonlight for this area, because water's really clear right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably the colors I'm going to choose too. Maybe watermelon, but somewhere in there.
Watermelon, that is a great color, really great, and it really excels to me on Leech Lake. Mm-hmm. You talk to any guide on Leech Lake, they do like the blues and stuff, but they love watermelon, and it just got a little bit of everything.
Moonlight blue too. You're a big moonlight blue guy.
He sees what I order, so he's telling on me right now.
You don't want to create a Tom Wynn frenzy of selling all the moonlight blue, but that's definitely, when I started here at Northland, everyone could kind of sigh when you brought up blue into product development, because historically it was a poor selling color, but lately it's definitely been on the rise. I know I've been using it more. It catches a lot of fish.
It's because some people are talking about it a little more.
Yeah, we kind of had to bug Bro, we know you want blue, but over the years, sometimes blue would end up being discontinued, and it would be Bro's favorite color.
Well, okay then.
So you got to promote it if you want it.
Yeah, I'll have it on. Okay. See, I'm reluctant, but I will definitely have moonlight tied on, and I'm definitely I like minnows, and we got some great bait shops. We got some good bait around here, especially this time of year, and I love spot tails. They're just such a strong minnow. Their heads are weak though, so you got to be careful how you hook them. But just love this time of year, and so do the fish. It's a guaranteed bite, basically.
Bro, to our viewers or listeners that aren't viewing this video, go in depth on how you double hook your shiner.
Well, with a long shank jig, I go in the mouth, and you can come out the gill and back into the side to keep them alive if you're throwing on fish that are close by. But I'm throwing it far. I'm ripping it sometimes. So I go in the mouth, come out the chest, like where the two fins are. And if you come out too close to the fins, you'll pop the fins right out of their body. But come out by the fins, push the collar of the jig in so you make that gap of the hook come through, and then turn and roll it up. So it looks like a jig worm. You've double hooked it, and it looks like a jig worm when it's on there. And then if you're in vegetation, whether it's live or dead, or some places you actually fish bulrush edges, you don't have to worry about snagging if you leave the tip of the hook in, or you can push the tip of the hook out.
You also have a weedless option then.
Yeah. That's one. I like doing the nose hook on the short shank, but when it comes to weeds, I really like doing that double hook. And we have a really good video of Bro talking about double hooking a shiner that I think was the first time me and you ever met. I shot that as an intern.
Wow, that
working
was
for
good.
Northland. So it was like 8 years ago. So don't judge on the video quality.
Holy.
But Bro's information quality is top notch in that. But yeah, it's one of our highest viewed videos on
I probably
on
had more
YouTube.
orange in my goatee back then, too.
Probably. I think the jig that it's on might be discontinued, but it all works the same. Maybe we need to shoot another one of these days. But it's a really good video, and it works really, really well.
What I
It's a
like about
good
that
technique
video is I got people getting in my boat now that watched it, and they know how to hook them on right away.
Yep.
So it's working.
Good.
So what are you looking for when you're gonna go out on opener for structure, and where are the fish located?
Well, the key thing is temperature. Walleyes spawn in the low 50s, and by the time opener is up and going, it depends on the water temperature. If I can find 60s, I'm going to find recuperated fish, and I might get some bigger ones, bigger bites. And if I just can't find that kind of temp, then I'll go to large flats that have a little gravel, and I'm going to key in on depths. Basically, I'll start shallow. So I'm going shallow, and I will use my side imaging to mark them. And they really show up nice on sand and gravel. They show up perfect. You can see their shadows first. And so I'll set the beam out maybe 80 feet. And if there's weeds or some other substrates in there, I'll bring it back to about 50. So you get a bigger fish, not just a little piece of rice. And so looking for the warmest temperatures, and wherever there's a little bit of chop coming in, it's true. In really shallow water, they are just more aggressive, more active in chop, and they move around more. They're more, they really hit it. And so windswept points and inside cups, flats. So lakes like Leech, Cass, Winnie, and all surrounding lakes in between, there's walleyes all over the place. These are walleye factories. So if there's a lot of people fishing a point, there's probably a good spot. But you don't have to be in the group. You can get off in the sand, and there's still going to be fish. There'll be real tight schools, and then they'll stratify across to the next spot. But there's so many points on our lakes. There's no point being on a busy point.
That's right.
Exactly. And don't, like you said, don't get glued to where all the boats are. Like, slide on the outside edge of the boats. I know that's one thing I've done and really started to pick up fish kind of as you get on the outskirts of it as well. So
it's tradition, and so a lot of people start and fish the same lakes. So you go to Leech Lake, there's definitely going to be some rafts out there, and there's going to be people running and gunning. If you go to lakes like Cass are a little bit more complicated because, they're deep, cold, barren water, so the fish are going to be all jammed up into small areas, and you might have to deal with boats. But you get Winnie and Leech, there's going to be some long rafts of boats, but there's so many places to get fish.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to be looking for anything that's deep water off the shoreline. So I definitely study the maps and I know where I'm probably going to go. But and any tributaries coming in are going to have fish still returning, and I can't see our water hitting above 60s. So definitely the mouths are going to be active, and they're going to continually reload. So any kind of rivers or chain of lakes, wherever that chain is, and it dumps into the next, it's going to be loaded.
When you say deep water, what is deep water early season like this to you?
Deep water are basins that have 40 to 80 feet, so you know it's going to be really cold off those places. Yep. And just on purpose, a couple of times I've fished for fish that were shallow near these areas, and they were a lot less active. And they just don't bite as readily. They might follow, they might ignore your bait. And so I try to find, when I'm highlighting features on like the hummingbird helix on the maps, the green is kind of my target zone, and I'm going to set that. Basically, red is danger. You got to put red 4 feet or less, because some rocks are pretty tall. 4 feet to 10 feet.
And the water's down, too.
Water's down. It's slowly rising. We have had quite a bit of rain. It actually come up on some bodies of water. It's come up already like 6 or 8 inches, which is pretty amazing. But it was a steady rain. And let's just hope it keeps coming up, because more water, more fish, more fertility getting in the lake. And a lot of the walleyes that normally would go up a river, some of the rivers are so shallow, they didn't quite get to where they normally go, so they might have spawned on the outside. So it'll be interesting, but I think we've trapped more fish in the lake. Places like where they do the egg stripping operations throughout Minnesota. Those places obviously were really busy, but it also tells you that they've returned. So you got to get kind of the next level of where those fish are going out to, those same fish, and mostly big ones. And the males will linger on spots, so that makes up the lion's share of the catch and eat part of it.
With the spring that we've had so far, do you expect it to be a average, good, or bad opener?
I think it's going to be fantastic. One of the best openers I can say for decades, because our populations are really high, and we have a whole bunch of fish in the system that are that 15 to 17 inches. Winnie is full of fish that just became not legal. There's fish that were 17 3/4 last fall and winter that are going to be 18 1/8 or 18 even. If the tail touches, if you can make it touch, they can make it touch. So if you don't quite make it, just know that they're good at stretching the people that write the tickets. So make sure, don't keep it. Just keep a safety of maybe a 1/4 inch, and you're not going to have that much meat in the difference. But so there's a whole bunch of fish in the system. So it's action. Even if you got to throw them back, it's catching fish. And then the eater fish, plenty of them in all bodies of water. It's hard to pick. There's so many good spots, and Red is epic. Red Lake is super busy. You better be up on your back and down the boat thing, and you better get out of the way fast. And don't plan on parking close by unless you get there late in the afternoon. Red Lake is a lake that's just go out of the gap and pick a spot and cast or throw. That's a good place for a slip bobber because the fish just swim through. But there is nothing you could fly to in Canada that has more fish than Red Lake on the opener.
It's kind of like going out of your driveway. Go to the river. You want to go left or do you want to go right?
Yeah, that's the tough part is last year I went all over the place, up and back in the nooks and crannies, and I finally just went over by a bridge. And I had a father and a son with me, and it wasn't a guide trip. It was someone that was helping me with a little bit of construction projects, and so I wanted to make sure to do good so that they would do good. And we did the goose chase because I was hoping to get them in some unique areas, and just had to go to the community hole. And there's lines casting all around us, but it was a fast limit, 12 fish in probably less than a half hour, 20-something minutes. And if my line was in when I was netting his son's fish, and I had to net his fish, and then my rod was getting pulled almost in, so I had to put my foot on it. It was that kind of action in the middle of the afternoon. So pretty excited about this opener because, if anything, it's some of the best fishing of the year before any storms, real heavy storms, can mess it up.
Bro, we talked a little bit off camera. You like to change it up every opener. you don't like to repeat lakes. Are you going to go hit one of those big walleye factory lakes, or will you be in a pothole, northern Minnesota?
Well, I fished a 120 acre lake 6 years ago. Then we went to 5 years ago, went to Lake of the Woods, and there is no better fishing anywhere than Lake of the Woods right in the morning at the gap of Pine Island, except at 8:01, you've got a string of launches coming by that are going to swamp you, and every fish in that whole area is gone.
So get out early.
So if you're going to be there, get away from the gap. And then went to Red Lake, and it was so good. It's not even funny how many fish you catch up there, but I took 8 casts behind my back with just a piece of a leech on a fireball jig head, and 8 casts in a row I hooked a fish behind my back.
Wow.
And with Bill Linder taking pictures of it, and that's how good red is. And then the next couple of years, just fished places around. I fished Winnie, fished leech, but I tried to do something different.
Yeah.
This year, I don't know, I might go back to red. That was fun. And it's not about getting fish to eat, though there's tons. Where do you catch them like that?
Right. There's a reason why the lines are like that, the boat ramps are like that.
There is.
And I think it's worth it, like, almost every time to deal with the crowds, people. Like, you can get – the lake is huge.
Oh,
So even though there's tons of people parked at the accesses, you can get out there and find your own space, and there's fish everywhere.
With that, though, I feel like red can kind of sometimes throw a wrench at people and be really tough, where I think that was like, I know last year it was on fire, but I think 2 years ago, the opener on red was really, really tough, and all the local lakes were firing, and then the next weekend red like popped off. Mm-hmm. What is some of those things that just causes red to shut down?
Well, if you get real heavy winds,
Yep.
it stirs up like Lake of the Woods. Lake of the Woods at times gets so dirty it turns black like ink, and it just stirs up all the clay in the basin, and that could be extremely tough. Well, red, if it really gets stirred up bad, if you get some heavy winds from the west, that could really make a mess. But outside of that, I think sometimes when fish pull off the bank, they might be a little deeper than we normally fish. 4 feet is all you have to fish there. It's dark. Stick your rod tip in and count how many eyes you can see. Mm-hmm. That'll give you an idea. If you can't see the second one, start pitching up in 2 feet of water. And the thing is with red, when I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do and I'm coming out of the channel, the people waiting are catching fish behind my boat as they're casting. They're in boots fishing along the edges. The people in the river on the shore are catching fish as I'm going. So I literally see maybe a dozen fish caught from that short distance of the launch to the outside of the channel, and they just dredged it. But be careful, you could still hit rocks, and they're going to mark it. But as soon as I get to the end of the channel and I got to take a right or a left, I'm looking at the lineup of boats every direction, and there are a lot of people fighting fish as you're pulling out of there. So it throws a little bit of Red Lake confusion in you because they're catching it. But on the really tough bites, there's always spots to get them. Do you go down and hit the rocks on the south end, or do you hit the rocks all the way to the south end? Because with side imaging, you see there's rocks everywhere. There's strings of rocks. So any little tiny drop off has fish. And if the shiners are in, the walleyes will be in there just like crazy.
Yep.
Something that Donnie mentioned this year when we were on the Rainy River, and it's pretty obvious, but it was pretty good when we were there. And he said, look around, like, you don't see anyone running around. That means everyone is catching them good enough not to move.
That's true. And Rainy River is a good thing, too. And the fish just don't all dump out of there. And there's residents, but some of those lake fish take their time coming back. So where do some of the locals go? They go to the river because it's quiet.
Yeah.
And get away from the resorts a little bit upriver. And that river's such a cool place to fish. It's not a hard-working kind of thing. If you want to work hard, don't go to the Rainy River because you're just going to drop a jig over the side and spot lock and wait for him to move up to you. You could do that, or you could. Eye Candy works great there in deep V spinnerheads. But I did Rainy Lake 3 years ago. Went to Rainy in the opener, and I've heard it said before. Rainy's tough on the American side. Really tough on the opener. The fish are really deep. and I got to see it. It's not tough. It's really easy, but the fish do go deep right before that. And I think Rainey's a little later spawn because it's such a large body of water, but there are different bays that are shallower than others, so you can get by with paddle tails and stuff like that. But Rainy Lake, we were done in 20 minutes, and just for novelty, we drove 40 minutes to the spot, bunch of boats, and I'm just glad we had someone netting the fish in between Heather and I. But it was really fun.
You need to hire a full-time net man for you too?
Yeah, I'm sure that our buddy who was with probably won't fish with us on the opener again.
So, bro, you talked a little bit about using plastics. Is there a magic water temp for you where you go from live bait to plastics, or you just kind of read out the fish on what's going on?
Well, for years, it's been plastics have worked really well in 70-degree water temperatures, but plastics and puppet minnows, so instinctive reaction strikes. I caught them on plastics last year in 38-degree water. That's cold.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And just had to fish differently. And you either slow swam a paddle tail, but that minnow, the 3.5-inch minnow, moved real slow. And it's not about ripping it. There's times you look at it in the water, and if you get that tail to move and change directions and then let it sink, and its tail's floating up because it floats, they would hit it. So in the fall, 38-degree water, and then in the spring, it depends on the body of water. It's the mood of the fish. If they're biting, you don't need bait. If they're hitting, you just need that. And so I'm convinced plastics will work all the time. And what's kind of changed that here, it was kind of a live bait area.
Yeah.
But I think it's clearing waters. All the lakes have gotten clearer here. And, of course, we have a low year, so they're even clearer. But some lakes have zebra mussels. Some lakes don't have swamp runoff, which creates a tannin to kind of darken the water. But some lakes have held their stain. And so I think any place that's clear, fish are visual feeders just a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And just be careful how you scent it up. Mild is better than pungent. And I got friends that like to use garlic. I don't want any garlic near my lures. It's too loud of a scent.
Yeah.
Right.
Have you found one that you really like, bro? Or are you still experimenting?
Experimenting with emerald shiners. Squid is really mild. Mm-hmm. It's safe. And then you just can't go wrong with anything shiner. Nightcrawler is okay.
Oily bait fish type
Oily
stuff.
bait fish. And one unique thing I found, really paying attention to it last year, I did really well on the opener on the minnow, but then when the midge flies started hatching, they're the clouds that look like mosquitoes, the jigworm was hot. And then after the mayfly hatch, which is midge flies actually get the fish to bite and keeps them active and keeps them schooled up. The mayfly is the doomsday of walleye. It just kind of shuts them down because they fed them, their stomachs are full, their throats are full, their mouths are full. So I went to the paddle tail, and that worked fantastic, but it was a little bit deeper. Instead of being 4 to 8 feet, I was using paddle tails with 3/8 ounce and fishing 15, 18, 22, 24, and that worked really well. And then in the fall, when you get end of September in the cold water, the minnow. it's just like that. That's so jig crawler, paddle tail, minnow, or minnow, jig crawler, paddle tail, minnow, and you can use a paddle tail, but you got to slow it way down. Sometimes they don't want it moving too much, and that minnow rocks.
Interesting.
Bro's got a total system.
I know. I'm kind of processing the whole plastics through the season type deal. But
And it varies depending on where you go. If you're in any river system, they're just more aggressive because they're grabbing stuff out of the current.
Yep.
So even rivers between lakes, they're more aggressive. And I've seen that in darker stained lakes. We have a few in the area that are darker stained, and we might be able to get some stain in some of our lakes. Like Winnie typically had a few places where the bog stain was coming in and the fish would hide in it. Last year there was no place for the fish to hide. It was super gin clear and it made it tough. So this year will be interesting because now with that little bit of rain coming up, I think little nooks and crannies and corners and creeks, and not even rivers or creeks, But where bogs run into the lake, could be a just simple pouring out of the shoreline is going to be great. That dark water makes a big difference.
Well, bro, I know one thing we wanted to touch on with you. We've talked walleyes this entire time, but your Facebook page has been littered with panfish photos already this spring. I think you've gotten out. If we counted all the trips that Sam's taken, Charlie's taken, and I've taken, you've got us beat.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about your spring and what you've been up to with the panfish.
See, it's hard for me not to go because I don't want to let the fish down. They're waiting for me. But I love crappies and bluegills are my favorite, and we know that. And I guide for walleyes.
Yep.
Walleyes pay the bills, but big bluegills and slab crappies are what I like to fish for. They're just a little bit more fragile, so I take the guiding out of the walleyes, this is a factory up here, and I love fishing crappies. And crappies come in after ice out. They'll come in and work areas that are warming, and so it's been good. But this year we've had some rain and some low pressure systems coming through. The crappies have been suspended this year in spots where they just normally go into a boat harbor, a creek, and that kind of stuff. They're out in the lake, suspended near those areas, and they're only 5 or 8 feet below. And if we get a warm day where the sun's beating down, I found them. And, thanks to Mega Live and side imaging, I'm seeing this fish up higher, and you can catch them. But they're also aware of your boat, and they swim away. And that's crappies, basically. Bluegills, they're always near the bottom, and they love weeds. You find some green weeds, and you're going to be catching bluegills. And crappies will be anywhere there's cabbage or any kind of northern or Eurasian milfoil. But edges are really nice, and I think it's going to be a clash right on the opener. We're going to have a little warmer temperatures. Them bulrushes are dead. When they start coming up, the fish, if that water gets anywhere near 58 or so, they're going to start shopping those emergent vegetation areas, and crappies will be in there. Mm-hmm. And bluegills, they're going to be reluctant at first. They're going to be wherever there's weeds. And so if you have a place that's been calm and had a chance for weeds to grow, like a boat harbor, those are going to be great.
Yeah.
So little back bays on all lakes. It's not just big lakes, big giant lakes like Leech. If you want to go fish next to 129 boats in a crappie area, go to Leech. If you want to go fish with 3 boats, go to other lakes that aren't known for panfish. If they're not known, they're probably tougher. There's not a lot of them, but they're big. Yeah. And I don't keep big crappies. I throw them back. I don't want to keep anything 13 or 14. I'll keep them 12s, 11, 12s. And bluegills, never any that touch 9 inches with the tail pinched. It's just to keep the lakes really healthy. But I'll take pictures of the big ones.
That's right.
They're super good to eat. It's their fault, right? But, they're called panfish because you think of a frying pan and you're flipping them. But maybe we could call them photo fish instead, not panfish. No.
Did you see an initial surge of panfish when the ice came off? In northern Minnesota, we had a week or two there where it looked like we were going to have a great, this great spring with all this time to panfish fish and have those fish up in the bays and up in the warm water, and then it's kind of cooled down now. Did you see an initial surge of those fish at all?
The crappies and bluegills came in like they do, that second, third, fourth week of May. They were just everywhere, and I was like, this is early. What's going to go on? Yeah. And it was really good. And then winter came back, and those fish raced out of there. They got out of there quick, and they dropped over the edge. And big lakes like Red Lake, they're going to be where you got them under the ice during the cold front. But so when news travels, they're there. Well, they're going to be gone. They're long gone. Yep. And what I found on big lakes like that, you got your moneyes, you got your sheephead, you've got all those other fish that use the same spot that you don't see under the ice because they don't bite, but the sheephead are right there, and they're just kind of hanging there. And you just see the smaller circles, and they're crappies, and you'll see a few. But as soon as they can, they want to go into that warm water, and they chase the little minnows. And so small lakes are a little easier. Chains of lakes are really good. And, there's more panfish now than there has been in many years.
Yeah.
There were some great year classes that came out. Those little 6-inch crappies that were everywhere. are like 9s and 10s now.
Yep.
They get the really fast growth spurt, and then they slow down. And panfish are really old up here. That's why we have these limits and restrictions. But in deep south, they might be 12 inches in 2 years. Well, we don't have that.
Right.
It takes more like 10 years. And so, but fishing has been good for panfish, and seeing some big ones. The big ones bit really well early. Then winter came back, and it got tough. But now, bluegills seem to be really a little bit closer to the bottom. And so I've actually been using drop shots for crappies and bluegills. Crappies, you have to go super light or a tall drop shot, and bluegills are closer to the bottom. And why would you go to a drop shot? Because it's been a hurricane every day.
Yeah.
And your bobber would blow away from them.
Yep.
So, you talked about the bluegills or panfish go in 2 stages. So they move up and they're just like cruising, moving as fast as can be around the warmest water, chasing minnows, like you said. But then the water gets a little warmer and they start to do their thing and sit on beds. Do you attack those fish in 2 different presentations, or are you kind of fishing them the same way?
Well, whenever I'm fishing, so if I go into emergent weeds where there's hard bottom, then I'll use a longer fishing pole. I'll have 7, 8, 9 foot rods. If in the middle of summer, those weeds get as tall as they're up to your waist. If you're standing in a boat, they're really tall, so you have to crane in, up and down in pockets. Well, now it's not like that, so you can get by with shorter rods. You could actually vertically fish in between the bulrushes or big cabbage stalks that are in there. But if it finds cabbage and bulrushes, it's going to be really good. And the deeper, the better. And those fish sit a little bit more, but they work that area. Once they start making nests, they're going to stay. But there's always fish swimming through that are in different stages of they've already spawned, they're going to spawn, and then there's bluegills, rock bass, largemouth bass in some of these areas. But if a cold front comes in, that's the reset button. They're out of there. And so if you find really good vegetation near, they're going to be in that vegetation on the outside. Any lake that's got wood, timber, logs hanging in, you get a mix of that stuff. It's super good. But when that water gets in the low 60s, they're going to be putting on the spawn. And remember, if you're taking them that time of year, pick on the males. They kind of guard the nest, but they're really got the dark black on them, and they're typically they don't have the big fat bellies. There's no meat in the belly on a crappie, so if they're fat, that's a female with thousands of eggs. Put it back, and they're more silver. It depending on the lakes. Most of our lakes will be kind of silvery and with spots, but the males are really dark, and those are the ones you really want to keep in. Or small females is fine, but you don't want to keep big slab crappie full of eggs if you don't have to.
That's right.
So as far as panfish goes, you'll fish them on the bed and whatnot, or do you want to kind of avoid it during their spawn season?
Try not to tear it up. You can fish the edges, and there's
of the habitat, yeah,
of the habitat, and there's some little tricks to it also. So you could have a lot of people fishing in there, and they're not all going to get them because it might be just bulrushes with barren wasteland underneath. You need a mix. If you have a few rocks, some cane, a log, cabbage. I mean, it's like the crappies would have wanted if they built it. They want stuff. They want edges and things to hide in. And the only thing was when you add that extra stuff, you get rock bass, but they're extra biting and extra fight in between.
That's right.
Yeah, and they get a little tougher to target with the more vegetation and wood, but that's kind of what you want to look for.
Well, like I mentioned to Sam here, I had tennis elbow from catching largemouth bass, fishing for panfish, and there was days I couldn't even hardly lift my arm because we started with sturgeon, and you catch them on a walleye rod, that wears you out. If you have saltwater tackle or catfish, you can horse on them. When you get that light rod, you're fighting them forever. And
it's an endurance race.
Well, yeah, and then you get into the bass, and you're catching so many. Those who fish bass know what I'm talking about, tennis elbow. You ever get that you catch so many that you can't lift the pop? Yeah, that's a good problem to have. But they use the same stuff.
So, bro, let's talk a little bit about what you like to rig up on your panfish rods, as far as jigs, if you're using plain hooks, bobbers, what kind of live bait, plastics you got them. How do you fish panfish?
Well, I like using feather jigs. I've done really well, even on some bites without any bait. That feather hackle makes a big difference. And but I like the Crappie King tungsten jig. It's nice because even in the wind, it goes where you cast it. It's such a solid jig, so it's great for casting. Lands there, and it jigs nice when you're jigging. It's sharp. It really snaps. Add a couple of waxworms, and that thing's set. Or a small crappie minnow. On a light bite bobber, sometimes I'll use a weighted clip bobber because I'm fishing really shallow. So I'll clip it on a line and still have a knot in case I want to turn it into a slip bobber because you could turn the clip one side or the other. But I do like the light bite bobbers. And also, I'll use the eye candy plastics, and the minnow works great for crappies. For bluegills, it might be a little bit big, but I also tie drop shots in for crappies and bluegills, and with a little finger using a live bait loop knot. Then add a little sinker, and I'll use it on light tackle and a couple waxworms and that kind of stuff. A small bead that works really well, but bobbers when I can. But if you're going to go and you're intent on going and it's windy, that's where the drop shot comes in.
Yeah,
it stays where you cast it.
Yeah.
I like that tungsten jig too because it can kind of punch through the cover a little bit when you are fishing in that bull rush. It kind of helps, like flipping for bass.
Yeah.
You got to up your bobber a little bit because it is heavier, but you can kind of use it as a little punch jig. So
It also helps with fish and slip bobber. You might not have to add any split shots or any extra weight to it. It's going to drop down, stick your bobber up. And then another thing I was going to bring up, bro, I've seen you do is you cut down some eye candy to some more panfish sizes.
Yeah, that minnow is perfect. And right at the seam, there's a little narrow spot on the minnow to help it go side to side. I'll cut it right there, and it's perfect for crappies and bluegills. And bluegills, too, you don't want it too big because they nip at stuff, try to tear it and kill it. And I've been using that on a drop shot or a jig. I like the fact that it floats. The float is the key, I think, to all its successes in panfish, walleye, everything, is when you're done with a jig stroke, it's sticking up, and that's something different in the walleyes, and all the fish crush it. But definitely the Crappie King feather, and then the non-feathered Crappie King jig is nice with a live minnow. Just hook it through the dorsal or in the nose, or you could just load it up with waxworms. You don't have to use one waxworm. You could use 3. In my boat, you could use as many as you want.
minnows, waxworms, night crawlers. When, where, how?
Well, if I could have what I want, I'd love to have waxies, minnows, and then worms, just red worms. You can get them in some places, and crawlers both. Crawlers are real thick. If they're smaller crawlers, it's fine. You cut a little piece. But a worm is really nice, and I've used crickets. They're amazing. They just kill them. Maybe at a pet shop you can get them. They got to be alive. But I'd use waxworms most of the time. And big waxworms, really big ones, they're awesome, but they fall apart easy. The smaller ones are a little bit tougher. And I've used maggots, but I still like waxworms better because they're messier. And maggots really good in the wintertime. So waxworms and then minnows. Small crappie minnow works great for everything. If your bobber goes down and you don't got a crappie on it and it keeps going down, those are bluegills picking at your minnow. And so, and then, of course, using a red worm, or crawlers. A chunk of crawler is pretty hard to beat, but on like a jig, real nice feather jig, it's a little bit too big. So waxworms and crappie minnows first, and then bring the other stuff if you can get it. And, of course, tiny leeches. When people go to the bait shop, they can't wait to grab the big ones. I want the micro leeches.
Yeah.
Panfish kill them.
Yeah.
And they're always swimming, and they swim more. Really, the panfish leech is kind of the secret bait for everything. And in some of the tournaments I've done, some of the ones I actually cast a check, panfish leeches, it's not just a North Dakota thing. You get into Devil's Lake, they key in on tiny stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Those walleyes like those little ones. A little tip on that side. But for panfish, crappies eat them. Bluegills just love them, big ones. So
That's a great tip.
mm-hmm.
Yep.
Sounds
And they stay
like
on the hook good too.
sounds like bro goes into the bait shop and gets a charcuterie board
Yes,
of all the different meats.
you got it. You got to have it. I have everything. I have the whole buffet for the panfish, everything but the sneeze guard for them. And but even leeches, cutting them up into pieces works fantastic. We called it leeches pieces. It's a bluegill candy, but you take leeches and you actually cut them with a knife. So if you cut a piece off at a time, it's okay. But you're going to go through all of them.
You don't
Yeah.
just use your thumb.
No, you can. You could snip it if your thumbnail's grown in, or just a small line scissors.
Bite it.
Yeah, or bite it. I suppose. I don't remember eating any leeches, but I'm sure it's happened sometime in my life. But leeches, so it's kind of a scent thing, and they do exude a lot of slime, and so I've used chunks of them. They're fantastic, and that's the 8 walleyes and 8 casts up at Red Lake. I was on a chunk of a leech, on a short shank jig. So I think walleyes in every fish, bluegills, crappies, can on small presentations, but I just I try to go large if I can because I want to catch bigger crappies, bigger bluegills. So that's the argument. You can catch them on small stuff, but light tackle, light line. Using 3 or 4 pound test, mostly 4 because we've got a lot of northerns up here and they have teeth.
Yeah.
We found that the bluegills and crappies will eat those 3-inch minnows and the grub. The grub is deadly for crappies.
Yeah, they when the bluegills, when we get towards that spawn time, when the water gets in the 60s, bluegills will they will eat young of the year hatchlings like minnows and perch. They'll eat them that time of year quite often, and it's not just insects, so they could actually help for their protein and everything. And so that's why all of a sudden crankbaits work and active things work. And when the water gets in the low 70s, that's when bluegills spawn. So crappie spawn right away. It's closer to the walleye opener, and then bluegills are later. And if we get a cool summer, they don't spawn. Mm-hmm. Remember, if you find green weeds, you're going to find everything in there.
Yeah.
And even a few perch. I bumped into some schools, and right now with that water temperature getting closer to the middle 50s, they're going to be completely spawned out. And so they should be all spawned out by the opener. There's always some late arrivers. Mm-hmm. So if you catch one full of eggs, hey, bro, you're wrong. Well, no, in large lakes, some of them show up in June. Yeah. Like, where were they? But there's perch in the hard bottom areas, not so much they'll be in the cabbage, but they're going to be where the cara is, the cara beds, like on Bemidji and surrounding lakes, wherever you find that it looks like tumbleweed and it's just sitting there and it has no roots. That's why it pillows up. Mm-hmm. You get those edges, those have walleyes. That is a walleye spot, but perch love it too.
I know that's one thing you really like to do is ice out perch. Did you do much of that this spring?
I did. I just pulled into a spot, and I thought there was so much on the screen that they're actually kicking up sand. So it looked like a front coming in, like a wall cloud on the bottom, and it was all jumbo perch. So you could cast over your head, you could cast any direction, and the fish fought funny because you could hardly move. They were so fat, and you just pick them up. And I didn't toss them in; I'd set them in because they're just great big football perch, and in this area, this is kind of the Minnesota triangle for jumbo perch. I mean, they don't exist everywhere, but in our area from Bemidji to Winnie to Leech to all the little lakes in between, we have jumbo perch, and there's something right about it. But yeah, I hit into some of them schools that look like a storm cloud. There's so much activity down there, and they're spawned out by now. But ice out perch can be a blast. Keep the males. Throw the females back.
What do you use for a presentation for those ice out perch?
Deep V with that spinner, whether it's fall or spring. I love the deep V, the spinner, the eyes, and that willow leaf works great. Mm-hmm. And I'll double hook a fathead. on that. So, and that's anytime you have a spinner in the back of a jig head, that's going to be fantastic for jumbo perch, just bar none. And the walleyes are going to eat it too. So on the opener, if you want a chance for perch, make sure you use a deep V spin because it works really well. And I have some clients that have witnessed how good the spinners work, and the deep V, that willow leaf really works well. They see it, they come over and they grab it. It's a crayfish thing.
Yeah.
The crayfish have their claws and whatever. I think there's a whole lot of cool things to jump on that bandwagon that Sam could come up with, but that deep V spin is pretty hard to beat, and just mess around with colors.
Yep.
I was using pink and parakeet.
You play with the colored blades at all?
Yeah, that works really well also. I like that, and with the color on the blade as it's turning, it makes even faster turns look like slow motion, more action. Mm-hmm. And so crayfish colors, fantastic. Moonlight, great. Bright colors. There's silver, there's gold blades. Just got to buy a lot of them. Then you'll be set. And you get the light ones. They're great. You could put we were using the Deep V grub and
the eye candy grub.
Yeah, the eye candy. Yeah, the eye candy grub
with the Deep V.
Yes, and it bulks it up nice. Then you start getting bigger critters biting with teeth. So we had to kind of go back to the minnow, and but when the perch are there, it is just there's so many of them. But they're going to drop over the edge, so I have a feeling if you want to catch bigger ones, they'll be spawned out. Just go a little deeper and find that muddy, hard bottom edge, and you can see a stratification on your side imaging.
What's that exactly look like on your side?
So you'll see real dark bottom, and all of a sudden a white spot in there. That means hard bottom. And whether that's no matter what color you use, it'll be darker of that color. There's all different color palettes. You can make it any color you want, but I use amber, so it goes from being a dark brown to a real light, like brown. So it goes from coffee to coffee with cream.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then when you find that edge, pitch on it, because as they're sitting there and they're recuperating, the big females, they're going to be eating bloodworms as they come up, because the mid-fly hatch controls everything in the spring. It's a May, it's a June thing. And you'll find even in the fall, they're still coming out. There's just so many. It's probably the most important food source of the lake. Mayflies are huge, but they only come out just at one window. Midge-flies happen all the time, and perch school up on the midge-fly spots. Then walleyes will too. About the third week of June into July, you'll find all your eater walleyes will be schooled up tightly around where the midges are coming out of the bottom. And they're tiny, but they still eat them.
Mm-hmm. How many feet of water for the perch? When you say deeper?
I would say deeper. So, like on Leech Lake, it might be 14. Okay. On Winnie or something like that, it might be in the 20s. As soon as you turn into mud, near the shoreline. Yep. Yeah. Okay. You find a hole near there, they could be stacked. And even like on Bemidji, you get off that food shelf. Someplace on Bemidji, it drops to 50 really fast.
Yeah.
And so you don't need, it doesn't have to be outer space, where you just need it to drop and have mud. And wherever those weeds blowing all year, that's what the bloodworms eat, the decaying matter, and they're little cleaners of the lake. But I've noticed one thing. If you keep an eye on where they're at, that's always helped ice fishing and ice fishermen, ice fishing people for years. And it's the same with spring and early summer. Perch are extremely popular all winter long. People that live here, visitors from other areas, love fishing here for perch, and everything becomes secondary to perch. It's so popular, and they might only be able to get one time to go, and they might be here in the winter, but the perch don't just appear in the winter. They're still there in the summer, and it's such a nice bonus fish, and probably one of my favorites. And I even heard Gussie say he loves eating perch now, which is really, that tells you he's got zillions of walleyes, and he's eating them. So perch are really popular in the Midwest, and they're available.
That's right.
So there you have it. Walleyes, panfish, perch. Bro knows how to catch them all. I know I learned a lot here. One quick thing before we go, bro. Food has kind of been a ending topic for this show. How are you going to cook up your opener meal of walleyes?
I really like doing the coconut recipe, so I'm going to cut them into fingers, little chunks, and fry them with batter and a little bit of coconut in there, and just don't burn it. It's so good, and it's got that delicious fish fry taste, but with a little crunchy coconut stuff in there. Probably coconut walleye.
Do you add any sauce or just
Dipping sauces? Oh yeah. Yep. I'll definitely have a sweet and sour sauce, and I'll try different stuff. I like hot sauces, the mix of sweet and then something hot, like a Frank's Red Hot works really nice. And as far as batters you want to use, you want something that's a little bit crunchy, and if you want to get fancy, panko, but it'd be that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But the coconut is the real thing you want to make sure you don't do is burn the outside. I love that. It's kind of a good snack food, and it's good in the morning, the next day. It's just great food, cold, warm, and outside of that, that's probably something I really want to do this time.
sounds
So
delicious?
should we be over for dinner around 5?
Yeah, like that.
Sure.
We'll
If you come at 5, it'll be gone.
Okay.
So then I'll probably do a skillet walleye, and where that is butter. We just want something simple. Butter, no breading on it. Put onions in the pan. Cook the walleyes on the onions and butter until the onions caramelize underneath them, and then right at the end, put Parmesan. Cover it till the Parmesan turns into a coating. Then take it off, drain the pan, and bring a spatula because you want all of it. The onions, you want the caramelization, and all that with chunks of walleye. It's really good. And you get a lot of water because the walleye shrinks. So call it skillet walleye.
Gonna have to try that one.
So,
Bro, you've made me want to go fishing, and now you're making me hungry.
this is making me hungry. I think we're going to go grab something to eat now. But thanks again, everyone, for watching all the way to the end of the Fisherman's Favorite podcast. And we'll be back with the next one. Hopefully it's as good as this.
We'll see you on the water.
Northland, fish and tackle, fisherman's favorite. It's a fisherman's favorite.